I never imagined that coming home after just 3 days away would turn into the biggest legal battle of my life. My name is Dale Mercer. I'm 54 years old, and 5 years ago I bought a quiet lakefront lot for one simple reason: peace. It wasn't part of any neighborhood association. No HOA. No monthly dues. No board members telling me what color I could paint my fence or how often I had to mow the lawn. Before I signed the papers, I paid a lawyer to go through every page of the deed. The answer was crystal clear. The property belonged to me and me alone. That decision would end up saving everything. After being away for 72 hours, I turned onto my private road expecting nothing more than a quiet evening beside the water. Instead, I drove straight into a party. Large white tents covered my lawn. Music blasted across the lake. Children were running around an inflatable water slide that had been anchored beside my dock. Coolers, folding tables, and dozens of strangers covered my property. A huge banner stretched between my trees. Lakefront Community Weekend, hosted by Ridgewater HOA. I sat in my SUV for nearly a minute, trying to understand what I was looking at. 30, maybe 32 people. Families laughing. Kids playing. Neighbors eating barbecue. None of them had any idea they were standing on private property. Only one person knew exactly what she was doing. And she was already walking toward me. She carried a clipboard under one arm and wore an HOA badge around her neck. She stopped directly in front of me before I had taken 10 steps onto my own lawn. "You need to leave," she said firmly. "This is HOA property and you're interrupting a community event." I looked at her for a second, then calmly replied, "This lot belongs to me." She didn't hesitate. "No, it doesn't. The HOA has authority over every inch of shoreline in Ridgewater Estates. You're trespassing." She said it with absolute confidence, as if she'd repeated those words hundreds of times before. Then came the threats. "If you refuse to leave, I'll call 911. You'll receive HOA fines. We'll place a lien against your property. And you'll be removed." Behind her, the entire party had gone quiet. Adults stopped talking. Children stopped running. Everyone was watching. I simply kept my hands in my pockets. People with real authority rarely need to announce it. People pretending to have authority usually can't stop talking about it. Barbara Crane listed every bit of power she believed she had. Then she said something I'd never forget. "The HOA owns every inch of this shoreline. That isn't my opinion. That's the law." She had picked the wrong property. And the wrong owner. Without saying another word, I walked back to my SUV. She shouted after me. I ignored her. Inside the glove compartment sat a large manila envelope. Inside were certified copies of my deed. County survey maps. Tax records. Every document proving the property belonged only to me. I looked at the envelope. Then closed the compartment. I wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Instead of calling the police, I called someone else. Someone Barbara Crane couldn't possibly imagine I knew. Then I simply drove away. 5 years earlier, buying that lakefront lot had been one of the easiest decisions I'd ever made. The parcel sat beside Ridgewater Estates, a subdivision with 96 homes governed by an aggressive HOA. But my lot wasn't inside those boundaries. It had its own parcel number. Its own tax records. Its own deed. No HOA documents had ever been recorded against it. That distinction mattered. Because while the HOA controlled its own neighborhood, it had absolutely no authority over my property. Barbara Crane had been HOA president for 3 years. According to nearly everyone in the neighborhood, she treated the community like her personal kingdom. Within 18 months of taking office, she'd issued 14 property liens against homeowners. Some people were fined because their grass measured half an inch too tall. Others because a basketball hoop sat a few feet too close to the curb. One family was fined because visiting relatives parked in their own driveway for too many days. Most homeowners didn't fight back. Hearing a lawyer cost far more than simply paying the fines. Barbara understood that. Fear became her greatest weapon. By the time I returned home and found strangers enjoying a picnic on my property, everyone in Ridgewater had already learned not to question her. That explained the silence. Nobody at that party defended me. Nobody even spoke. Not because they believed Barbara. Because they were afraid of her. The following morning, while sorting through my accumulated mail, something caught my attention. The latest HOA newsletter. Normally, I would have tossed it into the trash. Instead, one sentence stopped me cold. The Ridgewater Lakefront property has officially been integrated into our community waterfront for all residents to enjoy year-round. I read the sentence twice. Then a third time. There had been no purchase. No deed transfer. No county filing. No legal agreement. Just a sentence printed in a neighborhood newsletter. Barbara had simply declared my land to be community property. As if writing it down somehow made it true. I immediately opened my laptop. Within minutes, I was searching county property records. Everything came back exactly as expected. Owner Dale Mercer. No HOA restrictions. No recorded claims. No shared ownership. Nothing. But as I dug deeper, something even more disturbing appeared. Barbara wasn't just letting neighbors enjoy my property. She had rented professional event equipment through the HOA. She had advertised the lakefront as HOA-owned. Even worse, she'd been charging residents $15 per household for weekend access. People had actually paid money to use land she didn't own. And she had collected every dollar. That was the moment my frustration disappeared. The anger became something much quieter. Much colder. I wasn't interested in arguing anymore. I was interested in documenting everything. The county recorder's office opened at 8:30 the next morning. I was standing at the counter 1 minute after they unlocked the doors. The clerk at the county recorder's office barely looked up when I handed over my parcel number. A few seconds later, she frowned at her computer screen. This property has no HOA filings attached to it. I know, I replied. I'd like that in writing. Within minutes, I walked out carrying certified copies of my deed, the official plat map, and a written statement confirming that my property had never been part of Ridgewater HOA. Now I wasn't working with opinions. I was working with evidence. That afternoon I called Barbara Crane. I politely asked if we could meet to discuss the property. To my surprise, she agreed immediately. Confidence can be dangerous. Sometimes it's earned. Sometimes it's borrowed. The next day we met inside the Ridgewater clubhouse. Barbara arrived carrying a thick folder. She smiled as if she already knew how the conversation would end. Without saying much, she slid a document across the table. This, she announced proudly, is our community waterfront declaration. It officially designates your lake lot as HOA common property. I looked at the paper carefully. It had HOA letterhead. Professional formatting. 3 signatures. Barbara's. And 2 other board members. At first glance it looked official. But one thing was missing. Actually, several things were missing. There was no county recording stamp. No filing number. No recorder's seal. Nothing showing it had ever been legally recorded. I asked one simple question. How many board members approved this? The board did. How many attended the vote? 3. I nodded. Then quietly photographed the document with my phone. Barbara seemed pleased. She probably assumed I was collecting proof against myself. She couldn't have been more wrong. Before leaving, I asked one final question. Has this document ever been filed with the county? She shook her head. It doesn't need to be. The HOA can designate community property internally. I simply thanked her for her time. As I walked toward the parking lot, she called after me. If you interfere again, the HOA attorney will sue. A few steps later, she repeated herself even louder. This will become a lawsuit, Mr. Mercer. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply wrote down the attorney's name. Then drove home. Back at my house, I opened Ridgewater's official bylaws. These weren't HOA newsletters. These were the legally filed governing documents. Within minutes, I found exactly what I was looking for. Barbara's declaration was impossible. The bylaws required 5 board members for any vote involving community property. Barbara had only 3 signatures. 3. Not 5. That document wasn't legally weak. It was legally worthless. A piece of paper printed on HOA letterhead didn't magically transfer ownership of private land. You cannot vote yourself into someone else's property, no matter how many times you hold the meeting. 2 days later, another surprise arrived. A certified HOA fine. Except, it wasn't addressed to me. It had been mailed to the previous owner of my property, someone who hadn't lived there in over 5 years. Barbara had apparently searched old HOA membership records. The problem? I'd never been a member. They didn't even know who owned the property they claimed belonged to them. That mistake went straight into my evidence folder. Every mistake mattered. That evening I called an old colleague. I didn't mention names. I described the situation as a hypothetical. Private property. Unauthorized events. A fake property declaration. Repeated entry after being warned. He listened quietly. When I finished, I asked one question. What would you call that? His answer came instantly. Criminal trespass. Nothing more. Nothing less. I thanked him and ended the call. A few hours later, another notification appeared. The Ridgewater neighborhood group had posted an announcement. The lakefront situation has been resolved in the HOA's favor. Community rights have been confirmed. Our next lakefront weekend will take place in 6 days. I stared at the screen, then opened a folder on my computer labeled with that Friday's date. Inside were photographs, copies of my deed, the county records, Barbara's declaration, and now screenshots of the HOA announcement. Every new message became another piece of evidence. Barbara thought every public statement strengthened her position. She didn't realize she was documenting her own actions. So I quietly saved everything. 2 mornings later, there was a knock at my front door. An elderly couple stood outside. The man held a worn manila folder tightly against his chest. I'm Walt, he said. This is my wife, June. We've been watching everything. I invited them inside. Neither accepted coffee. Instead, Walt slid the folder across the kitchen table. Inside were 21 HOA fine notices. Every single one paid. Every single one issued during Barbara's presidency. Grass violations. Garden flags. Grandchildren leaving bicycles outside overnight. Parking complaints. Tiny technical violations that most people would never notice. But 3 notices immediately caught my attention. Each accused Walt and June of unauthorized use of the HOA waterfront. The waterfront, they claimed. My property. Barbara had actually fined homeowners for walking near land she didn't own. She had collected money based on property she had absolutely no authority over. I looked at Walt. Did this happen to anyone else? He nodded slowly. Several families. But nobody wanted another Leon. Fear had kept everyone silent. Until now. That afternoon, I visited the property carrying the certified plat map. I located every original survey marker. Each iron stake matched the county records perfectly. The boundary line was exactly where the survey said it should be. 40 feet separated my property from the HOA common area. 40 feet. Not 4 inches. Not a disputed line. 40 full feet. I photographed every marker. Every measurement. Every boundary. Then returned home and compared the official plat map against the HOA bylaws. My parcel number appeared exactly 0 times. Not under community property. Not under recreational areas. Not anywhere. The lot had never belonged to Ridgewater. Not when the HOA was created. Not afterward. Not ever. Barbara's declaration hadn't changed reality. It had simply ignored it. And reality always wins eventually. That evening, my neighbor Greg knocked on my door. I think I have something you need. He pulled out his phone. 14 months ago, I saw Barbara's event crew setting up on your property. So I recorded it. The video lasted just 22 seconds. But it showed everything. Workers wearing Ridgewater HOA shirts carrying my Adirondack chairs away from my dock. Stacking them beside the fence. Making room for rental tables. No permission. No conversation. No authorization. Just people treating private property as if it belonged to them. Greg sent me the video. I added it to the evidence folder. Now I had certified deeds, county maps, official bylaws, meeting minutes, 21 HOA fine notices, photographs, and video evidence. Barbara had no idea how much she had already given me. And she was about to give me even more. The following Tuesday, another certified envelope arrived. This time it wasn't just another HOA notice. It was a legal filing. Barbara's attorney had filed a lease pendens against my property. If you've never heard that term before, here's what it means. A lease pendens doesn't transfer ownership. It doesn't prove someone else's claim is valid. But it places a cloud over your title. It tells banks, potential buyers, and title companies, this property is in legal dispute. In other words, it was designed to pressure me into giving up. I immediately contacted a real estate attorney. After reviewing the filing, he didn't hesitate. Your deed is crystal clear, he said. They don't have a legal claim. But until this filing is removed, your title remains affected. I thanked him, added another document to my growing evidence folder, and kept moving. The next morning another HOA message appeared online. The HOA's legal rights have been confirmed. Community access will continue during litigation. Barbara had just announced, in writing, that she intended to continue using my property despite knowing ownership was being challenged. That wasn't confidence. That was evidence. I took another screenshot, saved it, and waited. Saturday arrived. The second community lakefront weekend. This time I didn't interrupt. I parked across the road, turned on my camera, and watched. More than 40 people attended. The same tents. The same speakers. The same inflatable slide. Another banner hanging between my trees. A handwritten sign read, Community Waterfront Protected by the HOA. An hour into the event, Barbara gathered several residents near the dock. From where I sat, my phone clearly recorded her voice. She laughed and said, "He can't do anything while it's in court. We're protected." That sentence changed everything. She had just admitted she knew ownership was disputed. Yet she intentionally continued using the property anyway. The recording was timestamped, geotagged, crystal clear. It was exactly what I needed. A few days later, the HOA announced an emergency community meeting. Barbara wanted the residents to vote on making my lakefront property official HOA land. Nearly everyone attended. Barbara gave a polished presentation. She spoke about protecting property values, preserving community traditions, giving families lake access. Then she displayed a large printed map. According to her, the lakefront belonged to Ridgewater HOA. But while everyone watched the presentation, I noticed something nobody else did. The parcel number printed on the map was wrong, off by 2 digits. A small mistake, with enormous consequences. Barbara called for a vote. All in favor. 61 hands went into the air. She smiled proudly, took a photograph of the room, and immediately posted it online. The community has spoken. She believed the vote settled everything. But votes don't transfer property ownership. Deeds do. County records do. Not raised hands inside a clubhouse. As the meeting ended, Barbara stopped me near the exit. You should surrender the property. The community owns it now. I simply smiled. Good meeting. I'll see you soon. Then I walked away. 3 days later, I made the call I'd been preparing for since the very beginning. I filed a formal complaint with the appropriate federal authorities. I submitted everything. The certified deed, the county plat map, the parcel records, the HOA bylaws, Barbara's 3-signature declaration, Greg's video, Walt and June's fine notices, the Facebook posts, the recorded audio. Every document, Every photograph. Every timestamp. The attorney reviewing the evidence looked through the file quietly. Finally, he closed the folder. "This is a clean case." Those 4 words told me everything. A criminal trespass investigation began that same day. Thursday morning, 7:45 a.m. I knocked on Barbara Crane's front door. Standing beside me was an old colleague. His name was Tom Avery. Barbara opened the door. She looked at Tom, then at me, then at the federal credentials I held in my hand. The confidence disappeared instantly. For the first time since this started. She had nothing to say. I calmly laid my documents across the porch railing. My certified deed. My county plat map. My tax records. I pointed directly to the property line. It has been here since 2004. It has never changed. Then I placed Greg's video in front of her. She watched her own crew moving my furniture. Without permission. Without authority. Next. I played the recording from the second event. Her own voice echoed from my phone. "He can't do anything while it's in court." She stood completely silent. Finally, I played one last recording. The very first confrontation. Her voice saying, "The HOA owns every inch of this shoreline." She couldn't deny any of it. Because every word had come from her own mouth. That afternoon, everything unraveled. The HOA attorney withdrew from the lawsuit. The lease pendants was removed. My title became completely clear again. Barbara's 2 fellow board members hired separate attorneys. The criminal investigation expanded to include 4 individuals connected to the unauthorized events. Every piece of evidence had led to exactly where it needed to go. Within weeks, the civil lawsuit was dismissed permanently. A judge ruled that the HOA had no legal claim whatsoever to my property. Soon afterward, the court issued a permanent injunction. From that day forward, the HOA was legally prohibited from ever claiming ownership or authority over my land again. The neighborhood changed quickly. Barbara was removed as HOA president. The new board audited every fine issued during her administration. Multiple liens were canceled. Improper fines were refunded. Families who had lived in fear for years finally received written apologies. Even the local newspaper covered the story. The headline was simple. Federal Deputy U.S. Marshal files criminal trespass complaint after HOA uses private lakefront property. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need dramatic headlines. Facts speak loudly enough. A few weeks later, I returned to the lake. No tents. No banners. No loud music. Just quiet water. Exactly the way I'd hoped it would be when I bought the property years earlier. I placed 2 things on the dock table. My certified deed. And my federal credentials. For 2 weeks. Those 2 items had rested quietly inside my glove compartment while Barbara declared my property belonged to someone else. In the end, I never won because I argued louder. I won because I stayed patient. I documented everything. And I let the facts speak for themselves. Barbara once claimed the HOA owned every inch of that shoreline. She was right about one thing. Every inch was accounted for. The difference was, every inch belonged to me.